It is a practice of our justice to condemn some as a warning to others. To condemn them because they've done wrong would be stupidity, as Plato says, for what is done cannot be undone. But they are condemned so that they may not do the same wrong again, or so that others may avoid the example of their wrongdoing. We not correct the man we hang, we correct others through him. I do the same. My errors are by now natural and incorrigible, but the good that worthy men do the public by making themselves imitable, I shall perhaps do by making myself evitable. See Bassus' squalor, see how Albius' son lives poorly, lessons these to every one, not to squander his estate. By my publishing and accusing my imperfections, someone will learn to fear them. The parts that I most esteem in myself derive more honor from self-accusation than from self-commendation. That is why I fall back into the former and dwell on it more often. But when all is said and done, you never speak about yourself without loss. Your self-condemnation is always accredited, your self-praise discredited. There may be some people of my temperament, I who learn better by contrast than by example, and by flight than by pursuit. This was the sort of teaching that Cato the Elder had in view when he said that the wise have more to learn from the fools than the fools from the wise, and also that ancient lyre player who Pausanias tells us was accustomed to force his pupils to go hear a bad musician who lived across the way, where they might learn to hate his discords and false measures. The horror I feel for cruelty throws me back more deeply into clemency than any model of clemency could attract me to it. A good horseman does not correct my seat as does an attorney or a Venetian on horseback, and a bad way of speaking reforms mine better than a good one. Every day the stupid bearing of another warns and admonishes me. What stings, touches, and arouses us better than what pleases. These times are fit for improving us only backward, by disagreement more than by agreement, by difference more than by similarity. Being little taught by good examples, I make use of the bad ones, whose lessons are common. The most fruitful and natural exercise of our mind, in my opinion, is discussion. I find it sweeter than any other action of our life, and that is the reason why, if I were right now forced to choose, I believe I'd rather consent to lose my sight than my hearing or speech. The Athenians and the Romans too preserve this practice in great honor in their academies. In our time, the Italians retain some vestiges of it to their great advantage, as is seen by a comparison of our intelligence with theirs. The study of books is a languishing and feeble activity that gives no heat, whereas discussion teaches and exercises us at the same time. If I discuss with a strong mind and a stiff jouster, he presses on my flanks, prods me right and left. His ideas launch mine. Rivalry, glory, competition push me and lift me above myself, and unison is an altogether boring quality in discussion. As our mind is strengthened by communication with vigorous and orderly minds, so it is impossible to say how much it loses and degenerates by our continual association and frequentation with mean and sickly minds. There is no contagion that spreads like that one. I know by enough experience how much it is worth per yard. I love to argue and discuss, but in small group and for my own sake, for to serve as a spectacle to the great and make a competitive parade of one's wit and chatter is an occupation that I find very unbecoming to a man of honor. Stupidity is a bad quality, but to be unable to endure it, to be irritated and chafed by it, as happens to me, is another sort of malady which is scarcely less troublesome than stupidity, and that is what I now wish to accuse in myself. I enter into discussion and argument with great freedom and ease, inasmuch as opinion finds in me a bad soil to penetrate and take deep roots in. No propositions astonish me, no belief offends me, whatever contrast it offers with my own. There is no fancy so frivolous and so extravagant that it does not seem to me quite suitable to the production of the human mind. We who deprive our judgment of the right to make decisions look mildly on opinions different from ours. And if we do not lend them our judgment, we easily lend them our ears. Where one scale of the balance is totally empty, I let the other vacillate under an old woman's dreams. And it seems to me excusable if I take rather the odd number than the even, Thursday rather than Friday, if I am happier to be 12th or 14th than 13th at the table, if I would rather see a hare skirting my path when I travel than crossing it, and rather give my left foot than my right to be booted first. All such idle fancies which are in credit around us deserve at least to be listened to. For me, they outweigh only emptiness, but they do outweigh that. Popular and chance opinions count and wait for something and not nothing in nature, and he who does not let himself go that far may perhaps fall into the vice of obstinacy to avoid that of superstition. So contradictions of opinions neither offend nor affect me, they merely arouse and exercise me. We flee from correction, we should face it and go to meet it, especially when it comes in the form of discussion, not ex cathedra. At every opposition, we do not consider whether it is just, but right or wrong, how we can get rid of it. Instead of stretching out our arms to it, we stretch out our claws. I should stand to be rudely jarred by my friends. I could stand to be rudely jarred by my friends. You're a fool, you're dreaming. I like to see people speak up bravely among gallant men, to see the words go where the thought goes. We should strengthen and toughen our ears against this tenderness toward the ceremonious sound of words. I like a strong, manly fellowship and familiarity, a friendship that delights in the sharpness and vigor of its intercourse, as does love in bites and scratches that draw blood. When someone opposes me, he rouses my attention, not my anger. I go to meet a man who contradicts me, who instructs me. The cause of truth should be the common cause for both. What will he answer? The passion of wrath has already smitten his judgment. Confusion has seized it before reason. It would be useful if we decided our disputes by a wager, if there was a material mark of our losses, so that we might keep an account of them. And my valet could say to me, "It cost you 100 crowns 20 times last year to be ignorant and stubborn." I give a warm welcome to truth in whatever hand I find it, and cheerfully surrender to it and extend my conquered arms from as far off as I see it approach. In truth, I seek more the company of people who treat me roughly than of that of those who fear me. It is an insipid and harmful pleasure to have to do with people who admire us and give way to us. Antitheses ordered his children never to thank or to be grateful to a man who praised them. I feel much prouder of the victory I win over myself when, in the very heat of the battle, I make myself bow beneath the force of my adversary's reason, than I feel gratified by the victory I win over him through his weakness. In fine, I receive and acknowledge any sort of blows that are straightforward, however weak they may be, but I am only too intolerant of those that are out of order. I care little about the subject matter. Opinions are all one to me. I am almost indifferent about which opinion wins. I will argue peaceably a whole day if the debate is conducted with order. But when the argument is confused and disorderly, I give up the substance and attach myself angrily and discriminately to the form, and throw myself into a headstrong, malicious, and imperious way of arguing, which I have to blush for afterward. What is the use of your setting out in quest of that which is, with a man whose pace and gait are no good? We do no wrong to the subject when we leave it in order to see about the way to treat it. I do not mean a scholastic and artificial way, I mean a natural way, that of a sound understanding. What will come out of it in the end? One goes east, the other west. They lose the main point and mislay it in the throng of incidentals. After an hour of stormy argument, they do not know what they are looking for. One is low, another high. another wide of the mark. One man catches at a word or a smile, one is longer aware of his opponent's points. So involved is he, no longer aware of his opponent's points. So involved is he in the course of his argument, and he is thinking about following himself, not you. One man finding his back too weak fears everything, denies everything, mixes up and confuses the point from the outset. One man, provided he can strike, does not care how much he lays himself open. Another counts his words and weighs them as reasons. This one uses only the advantage of his voice and lungs. Here is one who concludes against himself, and this one who deafens you with useless preambles and digressions. This last fellow sees nothing in reason, but holds you besieged within the dialectical enclosure of his clauses and with the formulas of his art. Now, who will not begin to distrust learning and to doubt whether any solid fruit can be derived from it if for the needs of life, for the needs of life, considering the use we make of it? Who has acquired understanding from logic? Where are her fine promises? Do we witness more of a jumble in the chatter of fishwives than in the public disputations of the professional logicians? I would rather have my son learn to speak in the taverns than in the schools of talk. Take a master of arts, converse with him. Why does he not make us feel this artificial excellence and captivate the women and the ignoramuses like ourselves with admiration for the strength of his reasons and the beauty of his order? Why does he not dominate and persuade us at will? Why does a man with such advantages in matter and method mix insults, recklessness, and fury with his fencing? Let him strip off his hood, his gown, and his Latin. Let him not beat our ears with pure and undigested Aristotle, and you will take him for one of us, or worse. It seems to me that with this complication and interlacing of language with which they beset us, it turns out as with sleight of hand performers, the dexterity attacks and overpowers our senses, but it does not shake our belief at all. Aside from this legerdemain, they do not they do nothing that is not commonplace and mean. For being more learned, they are nonetheless inept. I love and honor learning as much as those who have it, and in its true use it is man's most noble and powerful acquisition. But in those, and their number is infinite, who base their fundamental capacity and worth on it, who appeal from their understanding to their memory, and can do nothing except by the book, I hate it. I dare say so, a little more than stupidity. In my country and in my time, learning often enough mends purses, rarely minds. If it encounters dull minds, it weighs them down and suffocates them like a crude and undigested mass. If sharp ones, it is apt to purify, clarify, and subtilize them to the point of inanition. Inanition. It is a thing of almost indifferent quality, a very useful accessory to a well-born mind, pernicious and harmful to another. Or rather, it is a thing of very precious use, which will not let itself be possessed at a low price. In one hand it is a scepter, in another a fool's bauble. Let us get on. But let us get on. What greater victory do you expect than to teach your enemy that he is no match for you? When you win the advantage for your proposition, it is truth that wins. When you win the advantage for your order and method, it is you who win. Agitation and the chase are properly our quarry. We are not excusable if we conduct it badly and irrelevantly. To fail in the catch is another thing, for we are born to quest after truth. To possess it belongs to a greater power. It is not, as Democritus said, hidden in the bottom of abysses, but rather elevated to an infinite height in the divine knowledge. The question is not who will hit the ring, but who will make the best runs at it. He who speaks true can speak as foolishly as he who speaks false, for we are concerned with the manner, not the matter, of speaking. My humor is to consider the form as much as the substance. The advocate as much as the cause, as Alcibiades ordered we should do. Any man may speak truly, but to speak with order, wisely, and competently, of that few men are capable. Thus it is not the falsity that comes from ignorance that offends me, but the ineptitude. I have broken off many dealings that would have been useful to me because of the irrelevant bickering of those with whom I was dealing. I do not get excited once in a year over the mistakes of those over whom I have authority, but over the stupidity and obstinacy of their brutish and asinine assertions, excuses, and defenses. We are at each other's throats every day. They understand neither what is said nor why, and answer accordingly. It is enough to drive a man to despair. I never feel my head roughly jarred except by another head, and I put up with the vices of my servants sooner than with their heedlessness, importunity, and stupidity. Let them do less, provided they are capable of doing something. You live in hope of kindling their will, but from a stump there is nothing worth while to be hoped for or enjoyed. But suppose I take things otherwise than they are. Perhaps I do, and this is why I blame my impatience and hold in the first place that it is equally a fault in one who is right and in one who is wrong. For it is always a tyrannical ill humor to be unable to endure a way of thinking different from your own. And then, in truth, there is no greater, more constant, or more uncouth absurdity than to become worked up and stung by the absurdities of the world, for it irritates us chiefly with ourselves, and that philosopher of times past would never have lacked occasion for his tears as long as he considered himself. How many stupid things I say and rely every day in my own judgment, and so assuredly how many more in the judgment of others. After all, why can we encounter someone with a crooked and malformed body without being moved, when we cannot bear encountering ill-ordered mind without getting angry? This vicious violence has more to do with the judge than with the fault. Let us always have this saying of Plato in our mouths: if I find a thing unsound, it is not because I myself am unsound. Am I myself at fault? Am I If I find a thing unsound, is it not because I myself am unsound? Am I not myself at fault? May not my admonition be turned against me, around against me, a wise and divine refrain, which scourges the most universal and common error of mankind. This was ingeniously well said and much to the point by the man who thought it up. Every man likes the smell of his own dung. Erasmus. Erasmus. I'm only reading the earlier edition. I'm not reading the stuff he added in later. The senses act as the proper and primary judges for us, and they perceive things only by their external accidents. Thus, it is no wonder that in all the functions that serve the welfare of society, there is always such a universal a mixture of ceremony and outward show, that the best and most effective part of a government consists in these externals. It is still man we are dealing with, and it is a wonder how physical his nature is. As for those who in recent years try to construct for us a system of religious practice that is all contemplative and spiritual, they should not be astounded if there are some who think that religion would have melted away and slipped through their fingers if it did not hold fast among us as a mark, title, and instrument of division and faction, rather than by itself. As in conversation, the gravity, the gown, and the fortune of the speaker often give authority to vain and inept remarks. No one would presume that a personage so redoubtable and with such a following does not have within him some more than vulgar capacity, and that a man to whom so many commissions and offices are given, a man so disdainful and so supercilious, is not abler than this other man who bows to him at such a distance and whom no one employs. Not only the words, but also the grimaces of these people are considered and taken into account, everyone applying himself to put some fine and solid interpretation on them. If they stoop to common discussion and you offer them anything but approbation and reverence, they beat you down with the authority of their experience. They have heard, they have seen, they have done. You're overwhelmed with examples. I would fain tell them that the fruit of a surgeon's experience is not the history of his practice and his remembering that he has cured 4 people of the plague and 3 of the gout. unless he can derive from that experience the means of forming his judgment and can make us aware that he has become wiser in the practice of his art. If travels and offices have improved them, this ought to show in their increased understanding. It is not enough to count experiences. We must weigh and sort them. We must have digested and distilled them to extract from them the reasons and conclusions they contain. There never were so many historians. It is always good and useful to listen to them, for they furnish us with an abundance of fair and laudable instructions from the storehouse of their memory, a great help, surely, in the service of our life. But we are not looking for that at the moment. We are looking to see whether these narrators and collectors are themselves laudable. I hate every sort of tyranny, both in words and acts. I am inclined to resist with all my mind these vain externals that delude our judgment through the senses. In keeping a close watch on men of extraordinary eminence, I have found that they are for the most part men like the rest. For solid common sense is rare in this estate. Juvenal. Perhaps we esteem them and see them as less than they really are because they undertake more and show themselves more. They do not correspond to the burden they have taken on. There must be more vigor and power in the bearer than in the load. A man who has not exerted his full strength leaves you to guess whether he has any strength left over, whether he has been tested to the breaking point. A man who succumbs under his load reveals his measure and the weakness of his shoulders. That is why we see so many inept souls among the learned, more than of the other kind. They would have made good husbandmen, good tradesmen, good artisans. Their natural vigor was cut to that proportion. Learning is a thing of great weight. They collapse under it. Their mind is neither enough has either neither enough vigor nor enough skill to spread out and distribute that noble and powerful matter, to make use of it and derive help from it. It can do nothing except in a strong nature, and these are very rare. This is how they spoil themselves and make fools of themselves. Likewise, for those who rule and command us, who hold the world in their hands, it is not enough to have an ordinary understanding, to be able to do what we are able to do. They are far below us if they are not far above us. As they promise more, so they owe more, and therefore silence is for them a bearing not only decorous but and grave, but often also profitable and economical. For Megabyzus, having gone to see Apelles in his studio, remained a long time without saying a word, and then began to discuss the painter's works, for which he received this rough reprimand. As long as you kept silence, you seemed to be quite something because of your chains and your pomp. But now that we have heard you speak, there is no one, even to the boys in my shop, who does not despise you. Those magnificent trappings, that grand state, do not permit him to be ignorant with a common ignorance, and to speak without pertinence about painting. He should have maintained in silence that external and presumptive competence. To how many stupid souls in my time has a cold and taciturn mien served as a title to wisdom and capacity? Dignities and offices are necessarily given more by fortune than by merit, and people are often wrong to blame kings for this. On the contrary, it is a marvel that had they have such good luck having so little information. For nature has not given them a vision that can scrutinize a whole populace in order to discern preeminence and to penetrate our bosoms where dwells the knowledge of our wills and of our best worth. They must sift us by conjecture and gropingly, by family, wealth, learning, the voice of the people, very feeble evidence. If anyone could find a way in which men could be judged by justice and chosen by reason, with that single stroke he would establish a perfect form of government. Yes, but he successfully carried out that great affair. That is saying something, but it is not saying enough. For this maxim is justly accepted that we must not judge plans by results. We commonly perceive in the actions of this world that fortune to teach us how much power she has in all things, and because she takes pleasure in beating down our presumption, having been unable to make the incompetent wise, makes them lucky, as if to vie with virtue, and she likes to take a hand in favoring those operations in which the web is most purely her own, whence it is observed every day that the simplest among us brings to a successful conclusion a very big task, both private and public. As Ceramnes, the Persian, replied to those who were astounded how his affairs turned out so badly, seeing that his plans were so wise, that he was sole master of his plans, but of the outcome of his affairs, fortune was mistress. So these people can answer in the same way, but with an opposite twist. Most of the things of this world are done by themselves. The fates find out a way, Virgil. The outcome often justifies very inept management. Our intervention is little more than a routine, and more commonly a calculation of usage and example than of reason. Astonished at the greatness of an affair, I once learned from those who had carried it through their motives and their procedure. I found nothing but commonplace ideas, and the most commonplace and most used are perhaps the surest and the most desirable for practice, if not for show. What if the flattest reasons are the best founded, if the lowest, loosest, and most threadbare are the best adapted to affairs? To preserve the authority of the king's council, there is no need to have the profane take part in it or to see into it from closer than the first barrier. It must be revered on trust and as a whole if we want to foster its reputation. In my deliberations, I outline the matter a little and consider it sketchily in its first aspects. The heart and core of the matter I am accustomed to entrust to heaven. The rest leave to the gods. Horace. Good and bad luck, in my opinion, are two sovereign powers. It is unwise to think that human wisdom can fill the role of fortune, and vain is the undertaking of him who presumes to embrace both causes and consequences, and to lead by the hand the progress of his affair. Vain especially in the deliberations of war. There was never more military circumspection and prudence than is sometimes seen among us. Could it be that they are afraid of losing themselves on the way, and are reserving themselves for the denouement of the drama? I will say more, that even our wisdom and deliberation, for the most part, follow the lead of chance. My will and my reasoning are moved now in one way, now in another, and there are many of these movements that are directed without me. My reason has accidental impulsions that change from day to day. The phases of their minds are changed, their breasts conceive other emotions than before when a stormy wind drove the clouds on. Virgil. Just observe who are the most powerful in the cities and who do their jobs best. You ordinarily find that they are the least able. It has happened to women, children, and madmen to rule great states just as well as the ablest princes. We attribute the effects of their good fortune to their wisdom. Wherefore, I do indeed say that in every way, events are a meager evidence of our worth and capacity. Now, it's just on this point that we need only see a man elevated in dignity, even if we had known him 3 days before as an insignificant person. There glides imperceptibly into our minds a picture of greatness and ability, and we persuade ourselves that growing in status and authority is grown in merit. We judge him not by his worth, but as we do with counters, by the rights conferred upon him by his rank. Let chance turn again, let him fall back and be mixed up in the crowd again. Everyone will inquire with wonder about the cause that had raised him so high. Is this he? They say. Didn't he know anything more about it when he was there? Are princes content with so little? Truly, we are in good hands. This is a thing that I have often seen in my time. Yes, even the mask of greatness put on in our plays affects and deludes us somewhat. What I myself adore in kings is the crowd of their adorers. All deference and submission is due to them except that of our understanding. My reason is not trained to bend and bow. It is my knees. Melanthius, being asked what he thought of Dionysius' tragedy, said, I did not see it. It was so obfuscated by words. So most of those who judge the speeches of the great ought to say, I did not understand his meaning. It was so obfuscated by gravity, greatness, and majesty. Antisthenes was trying to persuade the Athenians one day to order their asses to be used in tilling the fields as well as the horses, whereupon he was answered that that animal is not born for such a service. That is all one, he replied. It just depends on your giving the order. For the most ignorant and incapable men whom you employ and command in your wars do not fail to become immediately very worthy of their charge, because you employ them in it. To this is related the custom of so many peoples who canonize the king they have created from among themselves, and are not content to honor him if they do not adore him. Those of Mexico, after the ceremonies of his coronation are completed, no longer dare look him in the face, but as if they had deified him by his royalty, they have him swear not only to maintain their religion, their laws, their liberties, and to be valiant, just, and kind, but also to make the sun move with its customary light, the clouds shed rain, In due season, the rivers run their courses, and the earth bear all things necessary for its people. I differ from this common fashion, and am more distrustful of ability when I see it accompanied by greatness of fortune and public esteem. You must take note how much an advantage it is for a man to speak at his own time, to choose his own point, to break off the discussion or change it with magisterial authority, to defend himself against the objections of others with a nod, a smile, or a silence, in the presence of a company that trembles with reverence and respect. A man of prodigious fortune, coming to add his opinion to some light discussion that was going on casually at his table, began precisely thus: "It can only be a liar or an ignoramus who will say otherwise than," and so on. Pursue the philosophical point, dagger in hand. Here is another observation for which I derive much use, that in arguments and discussions not all the remarks that seem good to us should be accepted immediately. Most men are rich with borrowed capacity. It may happen to a given man to make a fine point, a good answer and maxim, and put it forward without recognizing its force. We must not always yield to it, whatever truth or beauty it may have. We must either deliberately oppose it or draw back under color of not understanding it, in order to feel out on all sides how it is lodged in its author. All right, I'm going to stop now and do part two later.